I'm Chris Hook. I lead the sustainability team at Uber. I'm based in London, but I work on our businesses all over the world, focused on how we can transition Uber to being a net zero company as quickly as possible and hit some of the goals that we've set ourselves in terms of ensuring that we reduce our emissions across everything that we do. So a lot of the impact that Uber has in the world in terms of its emissions profile is caused by trips or deliveries that happen on the platform. So we've set ourselves a target to be net zero by 2040 in all 71 countries in which we operate. But we recognise that we need to have some milestones on the way. And so by 2025, we aim to be 100% electric vehicles here in London. Electric vehicles are the main way we think we can achieve that transition to net zero. And by 2030, we want to achieve that same goal, 100% zero emissions vehicles in the US, Canada, and in major cities here in Europe, and then everywhere by 2040. So that's really that's the pathway that me and the team are already pushing towards, and we're very hopeful that we can get there. One of the big challenges for Uber is we don't own the vehicles that operate on the platform. The vehicles are owned by drivers or by third-party fleets, and then they see the demand come through the platform. And so really our job is to ensure that we do what we can do to make the choice make sense for those individual drivers to switch over to electric vehicles. And we see a lot of very positive responses when we ask drivers about their excitement about making that transition. But there are two big barriers for them today. One is the cost of those vehicles, and the other is the access to things like charging infrastructure that allows you to use those vehicles in a seamless way. And so we see it as our role to engage with our drivers, educate them on why we think this is an important transition, but also to try and reduce that cost and reduce those other barriers through partnerships and working across the industry, and to make those vehicles as accessible to everybody who earns their living through the Uber platform. We've recognised right from when we first set our ambitious commitments that this wasn't going to be something we could achieve by ourselves. We talked about how we saw responding to the climate emergency as a team sport and something that we had to participate with many other people to do so. Some who we've worked with for a long time as a business in the vehicles industry, people who make and manufacture cars, people who finance those cars, as I said, third-party operators who look to own those assets, but maybe also some players that we have less traditionally worked with. Lots of companies in the EV charging space, whoever it is who's putting that infrastructure on the ground, we want to make sure it's put in places that make sense for people who earn their living through Uber, so that it can be used and it makes sense for the people who are owning and operating those assets. And then crucially, working hand in glove with cities and governments as they also look to hit their ambitious goals, and ensuring that transportation as a sector and as a whole industry is able to keep pace with the transition that we all need to see. I think events like Innovation Zero are an opportunity for us to really get out and understand what people are working on, how we're seeing the responses to the climate emergency push forward. There's a lot of ambition out there, and it's really useful to get together with people and compare notes. We're all learning in this process. We certainly don't have all the answers. We've tried some things, some have worked, some haven't worked so well. So we want to get out there and hear from others, learn what's been impactful. We need to accelerate across the board on this challenge. And so I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to engage with as many leaders in this space as possible, and hear what they have to say and share our story. I think the key thing that I want to get across when I'm at Innovation Zero and on the panels is to really ensure that people recognise the time for this transition is now, and the technologies exist, and we've really just got to come together to make it affordable for everybody, to make the transition and available to everybody, and really try and up the pace. We feel like we have a role to play there, and we're trying to move as fast as we can, but as we've said from the outset, this is a team sport, and so we've got to be moving together, and that's the kind of message I want to get across. Uber is first and foremost a technology company. We've built a marketplace that allows drivers and riders to connect, and for that demand to be fulfilled across many, many cities in the world. And so we want to make sure that we're using that technology for this purpose. We decided this year to host our first ever climate-themed product showcase, and we're going to host it here in London, which is our leading EV city across the world. And that's really about us recognizing that as a technology company, we have to deploy those resources and that expertise to make this transition happen as quickly as possible. And that's maybe the thing that we can bring to the party alongside all of our partnerships and our engagement across the industry. I think it's fair to say that as we push towards the goal of being net zero by 2040, there's no silver bullet, there's no one response that's going to get us all the way there. The big challenge that we're trying to address as a company is pace and ensuring that we can do this in a way that makes financial sense for those whose livelihoods depend on earning a living through platforms like Uber. So that means demonstrating that there is real demand for this new technology and that it can work for everybody, and it's not just a luxury product. And so it's about trying to bring the cost down as rapidly as possible, and then working in partnership with other companies to make that a reality. It's also about diversifying the ways in which you can move on the platform. Today, the majority of trips on Uber are in cars. In the future, we'd like those trips to be in electric cars, but we'd also like more trips to happen in other forms. A car isn't always the best way to get from A to B, and so offering more choice to use bikes or scooters or other forms of transport, depending on the city you're in and the type of journey you're trying to take, feels like a really important part of the puzzle for us. So there will be lots of different solutions. There are lots of challenges, a multifaceted problem, but we're optimistic about the ways in which we can try and address those. Yeah, you're right. Uber's not just a taxi company anymore, and it's really about the movement of people or things in lots of different ways. And my role encompasses all of those different parts of the company, and our commitment to being net zero by 2040 covers all parts of the company and our own operations, which are a small but important part of reducing our footprint. I think as I work with the teams across different parts of the business, one thing that I'm really struck by is some commonalities. Ultimately, the movement of whatever it is, a person, a package, some food requires a vehicle in some form or another. And so we need to think about zero emissions ways of doing that in all different contexts, but also some big differences. The technologies that are available today to the mass market for passenger cars are not yet available for long distance trucks. What makes sense here in London doesn't necessarily make sense in Sao Paulo or Delhi. And so I think it's about simultaneously recognizing where there are commonalities and where you can and therefore work at scale, and where you need to think about nuance and maybe a different type of emphasis to ensure that it still works in a way that's frictionless and that people can rely on. I think as we think about participation in Innovation Zero, I think the importance is just to recognize that we will need to really be innovative and creative in our responses to this huge challenge, and we need to work together to do that. Uber is determined to take a lead on parts of that we feel like are our responsibility, but we won't be able to do that alone. And so I'm really looking forward to engaging with different players from the public sector and the private sector to think about how we can collaborate to make this happen.